But in the working group, and at some point in time, I will be doing a podcast on this. I don't know if you all can see right there. Okay. You're going to see there's 12 plus the 13th is the primary editor, so to speak, or the chair. Okay. I've been doing some research on all of them, and their backgrounds are very interesting. One could say, and I will go so far as to say, maybe they all had a reason why they moved gender dysphoria to the forefront for the very first time. And this transitions then, as far as conversation, into the trans movement for next time. Mm-hmm. But you will see that which never existed before suddenly appear. Now clinicians and doctors are able to bill for services rendered, and there's a massive increase in 2013 that was never there before as far as gender dysphoria. It came out of the blue. Well, I can make the case that maybe, just maybe, it's setting the groundwork. Same thing for gender identity. That was never an issue. That was never until the DSM-4. And suddenly this term, without gender identity in the year 2000, when the DSM-4 was published, without gender identity coming into existence by a small group of people, you would never have the ground laid for gender dysphoria. Without gender dysphoria, you don't have the concept of gender fluidity. Without gender fluidity, you don't have the concept of gender confused. That's different than gender confused kids. Mm-hmm. Very different. But as far as gender fluidity, the gender unicorn, pronouns, and the trans movement. 15 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, it never existed, never was heard of, never a case. I worked with kids in the system who all of them were sexually molested. This has been fabricated, and it's scarring and doing horrible things to kids. But yeah, as far as what we just listened to, the fact that they're all in the same building, literally, should cause people to begin to ask some questions. And when Cantor said there was confidentiality agreements, I think what he was saying is he had more input than people could or were free to give him credit. So the real question is, why would he be so interested in this? And why is he so interested in normalizing and eventually, and here's the concern because of what he has said, he wants to make pedophilia a sexual orientation. He wants to give it that label, and sexual orientations
unchangeable
are legal they're legally protected. So this is not a theoretical issue. This is not a minor issue. This is an agenda. And if it's settled science, I'd be okay with it, but it's not. And I would say it's predicated upon believing that these men are not that way because of pornography. And these guys are that way because of porn. They were that way before porn, same stair-step process, but porn and the internet has supercharged this process. That's why one would expect, if my theory is correct, that whenever these guys are busted, they would be busted with child porn. Oops, and what do we find? 100%. We're not talking 70%, 50%, 100% of guys that would claim they were minor attracted. And this differentiation, maybe in closing here, to try to say there's a difference between a pedophile versus whatever term you want to use. What they're saying is this: once a guy is busted, now he's a pedophile. But prior to being busted, we can call him something else. Oh, how convenient. No, what I would say is this: if you lust after a kid, you lust after him because you've been doing porn and you don't want to admit it. And unless you admit your porn use, then you want me to believe that your identity and your daily struggle is so profound that you're going to make it part of your identity. You're going to go to a support group. You're going to seek out therapy, but you've never acted upon that. Therefore, you have the only compulsion in the world that you've never slipped and you've never cheated and you've never, so it's just not plausible. And that's what Cantor is saying. It's settled science. No, the settled science basically says this: every man that's ever busted with that's ever been minor attracted that's been busted has been busted with child porn. So the reality is that child porn and so pornography.
One thing that I want to make very clear to people is the very fact that James Cantor says the Born That Way pedophile is as solid as science gets is your indication that this man is deliberately deceptive.
Correct.
Okay, that
Correct.
is proof. Now, I just got a couple quick more clips, so let me just play those, and then we'll shut her down for the evening.
And Dr. Cantor, I talked about this.
Okay, this is Ray Blanchard.
Perspective. Are you on board with the work that Dr. Cantor and Dr. Michael Cito are doing, indicating that pedophilia may be like an orientation or something that they're born with, rather than saying that they're all just these perverted monsters?
Well, yeah, I think that quite possibly pedophilia has prenatal origins. James Cantor and I together, he was my postdoctoral student at that time, I think, did the first MRI study of pedophilia. And I had previously been doing research even before he came along, suggesting that pedophilia might result from some perturbation of neurodevelopment in utero. And so, yeah, I think that probably it will turn out that pedophilia has some, maybe not always prenatal, maybe it can result from an early head injury or something like that, but I think it has a biological basis.
And when you were doing
I don't think it results from moral turpitude, no.
Okay. And again, that's still a hard sell. No matter how much data you show, it's for so many people, it evokes such a strong reaction that people don't want to even hear it. They just want to say they're all monsters, lock them up, even if they've never offended, right? But they were saying that so many men have had their lives ruined, they can't get a job for the rest of their lives, they have to register as sex offenders forever because of this narrative. What is it like up in Canada then? I mean, is there more education around the real rates of
No,
recidivism?
it's the same situation, that people who actually work in the field take for granted that the recidivism rates are pretty low, and people who don't work in the field have this notion that recidivism rates are very high. And it's just a disconnect between what's known by the experts and what somehow makes it out into the popular culture. I don't think you can even hold the media at fault here, because in this particular race, I don't know that the media has an agenda here.
Okay, so there's Ray Blanchard, one of the main people pushing this narrative as well. So I don't know if you got any comments on that.
Yeah, just a couple real quick ones. One, are the reoffense rates lower for pedophiles? Correct. Now, what does that mean? They haven't been busted again. Does that mean they've reformed? Does that mean they haven't reoffended? No, it simply means there's less of a likelihood, from my perspective, less of a likelihood they're going to get busted because they compared notes and they learned how to hide better.
They're smarter now.
They're smarter now.
Yeah.
Well, John, how can you say that? Because the reality is they don't get arrested. That's all you can say, that the rearrest, hence reoffense rate, the rearrest rate is lower. The question is, did they reform themselves? No, because whenever you see one that is busted again, how much child porn does he have? 1 or 2 pictures or thousands? He has thousands, if not probably more than the first time he had. So, we're basing that upon, the reoffense rate, no, the rearrest rate. So just because they haven't been busted, they weren't busted before. It's like this. A guy's busted at age 40. So are we to say he was squeaky clean up until age 40? No. Question is, how long was he probably doing child porn? For many, many years until he got busted. He was that good. When he goes to prison, these guys compare notes.
Yeah, and how not to get busted again. Now, I'm going to play another clip here from Ray Blanchard. And what I want to say about this clip that people should pay attention to is this is what Ray Blanchard says here, I think, is a perfect illustration of what's known as a non-pecuniary conflict of interest. And you can see it in what he says here. So pay close attention here.
Are you aware, again, I don't know if you can estimate these things, on record, what percentage of pedophiles are exclusively pedophilic and what percentage have both adult and child preferences?
I kind of don't like that. I think that this distinction between exclusive pedophiles and non-exclusive pedophiles is somewhat artificial. If you think of a diagram of a mean and a standard deviation, all of us have our thing that we like the best, and they can differ. But we all of us also have a spread of what we'll take that's outside of our favorite. And I think just as people differ in what age is hottest for them, people also differ in how wide a net will they cast. So to me, exclusive pedophile, non-exclusive pedophile is not two different species. It's a matter of degree.
Right. The reason I asked was I was thinking, practically speaking, if there's a pedophile, if they have a wider interest, it might be easier for them then to divert that energy and say, focus on these people you're already interested in versus someone who's exclusively attracted. Do they stay then celibate for the rest of their life? Is it possible to make them more interested in adults? I don't know enough whether that's even possible. If someone's exclusive, could they ever be interested in adults?
This is such a gross conversation to watch. The way that they're talking is, it's like he's a comic book nerd talking to Stan Lee, asking like, could Spider-Man beat the Green Lantern in a fight? Like, they're just in their own version of the Marvel universe, but speaking about it with such authority, and except one that was based around the self-justification of pedophiles.
For the heterosexual pedophiles, I think they start out by having more interest in adult women than the homosexual pedophiles have in adult men. So I would say probably for the heterosexual pedophiles, it's easier to say, this might not be your number one choice, but stick to the older females. I think for the homosexual pedophiles, the difference in physical appearance between a prepubertal boy and an adult male is just too much of a stretch.
Well, and I have to be careful because I'm in the field, and these guys are. He's in the DSM,
Right.
so I will preface it, and he and I actually interacted briefly online. So what I'm about to say is said with all deference, but I'm simply going to say this. I am very surprised, with all due respect, that Dr. Blanchard would say what he said in this sense. He is woefully, this is not a pejorative statement I'm going to say, this is just fact. He is woefully ignorant of pedophiles. If you look through enough criminal files and do enough sex offender treatment over a long enough period of time in prison, you will see that there is an exclusivity. As a man degenerates, you don't have the fluidity of having a guy that will offend adults and then kids. On occasion, but the best way to view it is that slippery slope, stair step down. But by the time a guy has child victims, you will rarely, maybe 2% of the time, I've looked at hundreds of files, quite frankly, thousands. You just, by the time a guy's perping on kids, he's perping on kids. He ain't perping on adults anymore.
Nobody fucks monkeys and people, you idiot. You either fuck monkeys or you fuck people. That's it. There's no in between. You're not going to get some monkey pussy on Tuesday and then be like, oh, let me call Charlene on Thursday. No. Once you fuck a monkey, that's a firm decision.
How do you prove that? Get access to prison files and go through them. It's not hard. This is not opinion. So it shows you that Cantor and Blanchard, with all due respect to their educational background, they've never worked in a prison extensively. I had access to 100% of every kind of file on these guys and every police report, including juvenile history. Juvenile records are not expunged. And I had access, any psych staff has access to them all. So the vast majority of guys that are pedophiles, once they begin perping on kids, there will be a decreasing frequency as they move downward, because they start perping on adults in one way or the other, and they eventually get into kids. And by the time they get into kids, they get more and more into kids, and eventually they're not interested in adults. And that's why I'm amazed, with all due respect to Dr. Blanchard, because he may see this, and I don't want to get myself in trouble, but we're just going to talk knowledge. You don't teach a pedophile how to get attracted to adults. Why? Because they're not attracted anymore. Why? Because they're not attracted to kids. That term doesn't work. There's nothing about a child's body that is attractive because it's not lust. It is deviance and in darkness and a desire to defile. That's what motivates a pedophile. You can't get excited over a 4-year-old's body. That's what outpatient working with guys that are minor attracted, you'll never get at. I wouldn't have believed that if I hadn't worked in prison, but I've worked in prison, now I know it.
Mhm.
Okay, it's not lust. It's as though Blanchard still hasn't figured. I'm not blaming him, but if you're going to start doing the stuff, including gender dysphoria, that's created the entire trans deception, yeah, now I'm going to get a little agitated and definitive. It is not lust, and therefore you can't teach a guy, oh, get more attracted to women again. It's a different animal. He's different now, Jekyll and Hyde, but it doesn't go back and forth. He's morphed into a predator. He will always be a predator. All you can do is manage him, but he'll continue to fight the boundaries.
Mhm.